My nephew was bullied by a group of girls, so his mother punished him and made him shave his head. But she regretted it. I don't even know how to start this, but I feel like if I don't get it out, I'm going to explode. I need an outside perspective because my family is in pieces, and I honestly don't know if I'm the hero or the villain in this story. It all revolves around my nephew, Tommy. He's 8, and he's the gentlest soul I've ever known. He's one of those quiet, observant kids with huge, dark eyes who would rather spend an afternoon drawing incredibly detailed dragons than playing soccer. He's my brother's kid, but sometimes he feels more like mine. I'm the one he comes to when he scraped his knee or wants to show off a new drawing. His mom, my sister-in-law Pamela, is a lot. I love my brother, but Pamela and I have always had a complicated relationship. She's not evil, I want to be clear about that. She loves Tommy, I know she does, but her love is loud, overwhelming, and comes with a rulebook from the 1950s. Her core belief is that boys are basically feral creatures, and any sign of sensitivity or softness is a weakness that needs to be stamped out. Boys are troublemakers, she'll say with a shrug. You have to be firm or they'll walk all over you. We all live in Valparaiso, on one of the big hills overlooking the port. If you've never seen it, it's a chaotic rainbow of colorful houses clinging to the side of a cliff, all connected by a dizzying maze of winding staircases and narrow alleys. It's beautiful, but it's also incredibly claustrophobic. You can hear your neighbors' arguments through the thin walls, and you can't buy bread without 3 different people asking you about your personal life. There are no secrets on the Cerro. This becomes important later. These stairways are the kids' playground. They race up and down them, their shouts echoing between the houses. And for the past year, the undisputed queen of this concrete kingdom has been a 10-year-old girl named Michaela. She lives a few doors down. To most adults, especially her parents, she's a natural leader. She's pretty, charismatic, and always has a group of other girls trailing her like pilot fish. But I've seen the way she looks at other kids. There's a coldness there, a flicker of satisfaction when another kid gets left out or trips on the stairs. She decides the games, she decides who's in and who's out, and her word is law. Tommy, with his quiet nature and his, sketchbook, was a natural target, and his own mother's philosophy meant he never stood a chance. The thing is, it wasn't one big explosion. It was more like a slow leak, a constant hiss of pressure building for months. I saw the cracks forming long before the whole thing shattered. There were so many little incidents, moments that I brushed off or swallowed down because I didn't want to cause a fight. Now I see them as bright red flags. I remember one afternoon a few months ago, Tommy came, running to my door, his face streaked with tears and dirt. The sleeve of his favorite dinosaur t-shirt was torn almost completely off at the shoulder. Before I could even ask what happened, Pamela came storming up the stairs behind him, her face like a thundercloud. She didn't look at his tear-stained face or his ripped shirt. She just pointed a finger at him and her voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Tomas, what did you do? Not, what happened? Not, are you okay? But what did you do? He tried to explain, his little voice trembling, something about Michaela's group taking his ball and him trying to get it back. But Pamela just cut him off. I don't want to hear it. If they ganged up on you, you must have done something to provoke them. You have to learn to stand up for yourself, not come crying to me every time. Man up. She grabbed his arm and dragged him home, leaving me standing in my doorway with my heart pounding in my chest. I just stood there, clenching and unclenching my fists, the words I wanted to scream at her getting stuck in my throat. Then there was the constant, low-level cruelty from Michaela that my SIL refused to see. I was sitting on my little balcony one day, which overlooks the main set of stairs where the kids play. I saw Michaela organizing some elaborate game with chalk and bottle caps. Tommy approached them so hopefully, holding out a perfectly smooth gray stone he'd probably spent an hour searching for. I heard his little voice offer it up to be part of the game. Michaela didn't even look at him. She just looked at her second-in-command, a girl named Valentina, and smirked. Ugh, who wants a boring gray rock? She said, loud enough for everyone to hear. The other kids giggled. Tommy's face just crumpled. He didn't cry or yell. He just turned around, his shoulders slumped, and walked slowly back to his front door. I brought it up to Pamela that night, trying to be casual. Hey, Michaela was a little rough with Tommy today. Maybe you should have a word with her mom. She waved her hand dismissively, not even looking up from her phone. Sophia, please. They're children. That's just how kids play. You're too sensitive. Tommy needs to develop a thicker skin, and you hovering over him isn't helping. And that's the real reason I never said more. Arguing with Pamela is like trying to punch water. She's impossible to pin down. If you challenge her parenting, she doesn't hear your concern for Tommy. She hears a personal attack on her very being. The walls go up instantly. She'll get defensive, twist your words, and somehow, by the end of the conversation, you're the one apologizing. My brother, bless his conflict-avoidant heart, just stays out of it. His strategy has always been to just agree with her to keep the peace. So I just knew, that if I pushed too hard, she wouldn't change her mind. She would just dig her heels in deeper and probably limit the time I could spend with Tommy. And that was a risk I couldn't take. So I stayed quiet and the pressure kept building, and I just watched my sweet nephew get smaller and sadder every single day. The day it all finally broke, it started with the sound of the screen door slamming. It wasn't the usual cheerful bang of a kid running in for a glass of water. This was a frantic, desperate sound. I was in my kitchen, which shares a thin wall with my brother's place, and I felt the vibration right through the floorboards. A second later, I heard a wail. It was a sound so full of pain and humiliation that my blood ran cold. I dropped the dish towel and was out my door and into their living room before I even consciously decided to move. And there he was. My sweet, gentle Tommy. He was standing in the middle of the room, his small body racked with sobs that were more like gasps for air. But it was his hair that made me stop dead. His beautiful, dark curls, the ones that his mom was secretly so proud of, were a grotesque mess. A huge, sticky, bright pink wad of chewing gum was matted into the hair right above his forehead, tangled with dirt and what looked like little bits of leaves. It was like someone had tried to scalp him with bubble gum. Pamela came out of her bedroom, a scowl already on her face from the noise. She saw the gum, and her expression didn't soften into sympathy. It hardened into pure, unadulterated rage. Her eyes narrowed, and she pointed a trembling finger at Tommy. Tomas Alejandro, what did you do? He could barely speak through his sobs. It was Michaela and Valentina. They held me down. Don't you lie to me, she shrieked, her voice echoing in the small room. They wouldn't do that for no reason. You must have started it. I've told you and told you not to cause trouble, and you just don't listen. She grabbed him by the arm, dragging him toward the bathroom. I followed, my feet feeling like they were stuck in cement. Pamela, wait, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Just let's try to get it out with some ice. Or something. She ignored me. She threw open the bathroom cabinet, her movements jerky and furious, and pulled out my brother's electric buzz clippers. The sound of her flicking the switch on filled the tiny tiled room with a deafening, mechanical buzz. It was a sound of pure violence. Tommy froze. The sobs caught in his throat, replaced by a silent, terrified pleading in his huge eyes. He looked at me, and I will never, ever forget that look. It was a look that said, "Please, make her stop." And I did nothing. I just stood there, paralyzed in the doorway, my own rage a useless, silent lump in my throat. I just knew, that if I tried to physically stop her, she would explode, and it would only be worse for him later. So I watched as she pushed his head forward, the plastic guard of the clippers digging into his scalp. She wasn't cutting his hair. She was punishing him. She was shearing him like a sheep, hacking away at his beautiful curls with angry, clumsy strokes. Clumps of, dark hair matted with pink gum fell onto the white floor tiles. With every pass of the clippers, Tommy seemed to shrink, folding in on himself until he was just a small, trembling, shorn thing, staring at his own hair on the floor. When it was over, there was a horrible, ringing silence, broken only by the hum of the clippers she'd dropped into the sink. She looked at his reflection in the mirror, at his patchy, buzzed head, and gave a sharp, satisfied nod. There, she said, her voice cold. Maybe now you'll think twice before you go looking for a fight. She stormed out of the bathroom, leaving me alone with him. I knelt down, my heart feeling like a shattered piece of glass in my chest. I helped him gather his backpack and his jacket, my hands shaking. And that's when I saw it. A piece of lined notebook paper, folded into a tiny square, was sticking out of the side pocket of his bag. Thinking it was a drawing, I pulled it out to try and distract him. But it wasn't a drawing. It was a note, written in a loopy, childish scrawl with a pink glitter pen. Freak boy with girl hair. This is what you get. You better not snitch or next time will be worse. Underneath were 2 signatures, Michaela and Valentina, each with a little heart drawn next to it. I stared at the words, the glitter catching the light. All the helplessness, all the silent fury from the past few minutes drained away, and something else, something cold and sharp and heavy, settled in its place. It was resolve. This wasn't just kids being kids. This wasn't a prank gone wrong. This was a threat. And the person who was supposed to protect him from it had just punished him for it. In that moment, standing on the cold tile floor with my nephew's shorn hair around my feet and that cruel little note in my hand, I knew I was done being quiet. This wasn't about arguing with Pamela anymore. This was about getting justice for Tommy. And I would burn the whole neighborhood to the ground to get it. I stood there, frozen in the bathroom doorway, with that glittery pink note clutched in my hand. The paper felt flimsy, but the weight of the words was immense. My knuckles were white. For a second, the whole world just narrowed down to the hum of the clippers in the sink and the sight of Tommy's small, hunched shoulders. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run after Pamela, to grab her by the hair, to shove that note in her face and yell until my throat was raw. I wanted to shake her and ask her how she could be so blind, how she could look at her own son's pain and see a discipline problem. But I didn't. I just stood there, paralyzed. My breath was trapped in my chest, a hot, painful knot under my ribs. Because in that split second, another part of my brain, the cold, calculating part that had learned how to survive years of Pamela's bullshit, did the math. If I confronted her now, in the heat of her self-righteous fury, what would happen? She'd double down. She'd call me dramatic, call me a liar, maybe even accuse me of writing the note myself to make her look bad. She would turn it into a war between us, and Tommy would be the battlefield. She would use him to punish me, limiting our time together, poisoning him against me. And he would be left with no one. The scream in my head died, and I swallowed it down. It tasted like acid. Something inside me fundamentally shifted in that moment. The hot, explosive rage that had been building for months didn't just disappear. It was like it flash froze. It became something solid, heavy, and sharp. It was ice where there had been fire. I looked down at Tommy, who was still staring at the floor, at the evidence of his humiliation scattered around his feet. He hadn't said a word since she left. He was just gone, hollowed out. I saw his reflection in the chrome faucet, his eyes vacant, his head looking so vulnerable and strange, and my mission became crystal clear. This wasn't about winning an argument with my Esiel anymore. This wasn't about being right. This was about giving him his voice back. I tucked the note carefully into my pocket. The glitter felt obscene against my fingertips. I knelt in front of him, right there on the cold, hair-covered tiles. "Hey," I whispered. My own voice sounded weird, distant. He didn't look up. I gently took a washcloth, wet it with warm water, and started wiping the stray hairs from his neck and cheeks. My movements were slow, deliberate. On the outside, I was trying to project a calm I was nowhere near feeling. But on the inside, my mind was racing, gears grinding, pieces clicking into place. The anger was still there, but now it had a purpose. It wasn't a wildfire anymore. It was fuel. I wasn't just mad. I was building a weapon, and I was going to choose my moment, choose my target, and I was not going to miss. My first move was quiet. The next morning, while Pamela was still fuming, I went to see my neighbor, Don Carlos. He's a retired old man who watches the world from his window and has a fancy new doorbell camera that captures the entire back alley where the kids play. I knocked on his door with a plate of cookies I'd baked, my hands steady but my heart hammering. I kept my voice light. Don Carlos, I'm a little worried about some of the roughhousing in the alley lately. Would it be too much trouble to see if your camera caught anything from yesterday afternoon, around 4 p.m.? He was happy to oblige. As we watched the footage on his tablet, my stomach twisted. There it was, in grainy black and white. Michaela and Valentina grabbing Tommy, another girl holding his arms while Michaela laughed and ground the gum into his hair. There was no provocation. It was a straight-up assault. I asked him to email me the file. Evidence, step 1, complete. Phase 2 was the trap. I knew I couldn't just show the video. The parents would call it a one-off, kids being kids. I needed to expose the cruelty, the unrepentant malice behind it. So I came up with the Chero in Color Street Art Afternoon. I printed up cheerful flyers inviting all the neighborhood kids to a big chalk art session on the main stairway landing. Free juice boxes and cookies. A perfect Trojan horse of community fun. My logic was simple. Bullies are arrogant. They get away with things because no one calls them out. Give them a public stage and a box of chalk, and they won't be able to resist showing off how clever and cruel they are. Pamela found one of my flyers taped to the community notice board. She stormed over to my place, waving it in my face like it was a declaration of war. What is this, Sophia? What are you trying to do? Her voice was low and dangerous. Are you trying to humiliate me? To start some gossip war with the neighbors over a haircut? This has nothing to do with you, I said, my voice colder than I intended. This is about what they did to Tommy. He's my son, she shot back. And I handled it. You are not to drag this out and make a public spectacle. Tommy is forbidden from going to your little art party. You're just stirring the pot. I just looked at her. He doesn't have to go, but I'm still doing it. The look on her face was pure fury, but for the first time I didn't care. The battle lines were drawn. The day of the art event was bright and sunny. Kids were everywhere, parents were chatting, the concrete was a kaleidoscope of chalky color. I had my cousin, who is a teenager and lives on her phone, positioned perfectly. Her only job was to watch Michaela's group. It didn't take long. High on sugar and attention, Michaela grabbed a piece of brown chalk. And there, in the middle of a huge, sunny yellow patch, she drew it. A caricature of a boy with huge, crying eyes and a weird, patchy head with the word freak written above it in big, bubbly letters. Her friends howled with laughter. Valentina pulled out her phone and started filming it for her Instagram story, the camera panning from the drawing to Michaela, who took a dramatic bow. My cousin, bless her stealthy soul, screen-recorded the whole thing. The trap had snapped shut. That evening, I sent a message to the neighborhood parents group chat. Urgent meeting about safety in the alley, 8 p.m., by Don Carlos's back gate. When they were all gathered, including Pamela, who looked suspicious and angry, I didn't say a word. I just propped my tablet against the wall. First, I played the doorbell footage. The silence was immediate and absolute. You could hear a pin drop. The parents' faces went from confused to shocked. Michaela's mom let out a little gasp. That's just kids getting too rough, her dad stammered, but his voice lacked conviction. Is it? I asked quietly. Then I pulled out my phone. Because this was from this afternoon. I played the screen recording. The video of the cruel chalk drawing, the laughter, Michaela's proud bow. The sound echoed in the narrow alley. The parents stared, their faces a mixture of horror and fury. I watched Michaela's parents' faces crumble as they saw their natural leader for what she really was. But my eyes were on Pamela. She stared at the phone screen, her mouth slightly open. I watched the anger in her eyes curdle into confusion, then dawning, sickening realization. The blood drained from her face. She looked from the video of the laughing girls to the memory of her own son's terrified face in the bathroom mirror, and a choked, guttural sound escaped her throat. In that moment, I knew I had broken through. But I had also dropped a bomb right in the middle of our lives, and the fallout was just beginning. I expected to feel good, vindicated, triumphant even. But as the parents shuffled away from the alley that night, muttering to each other in shocked whispers, there was no victory lap. There was just the cold night air, the smell of jasmine from someone's garden, and the hollow, ringing silence left behind after the bomb went off. The adrenaline that had been pumping through my veins for 48 hours just evaporated, leaving me feeling shaky and nauseous. I stood there under the single buzzing streetlight, and all I could think was, what have I done? I keep replaying it in my head. The looks on the faces of Michaela's parents. It wasn't just anger at their daughter, it was shame. A deep, public humiliation that I had engineered and served to them on a platter. I didn't just expose a bully. I weaponized a community against a 10-year-old girl. I orchestrated a takedown, complete with video evidence and a captive audience. When I think about it like that, my stomach just clenches. Was it my place? Did I have the right to detonate a grenade in the middle of our neighborhood, catching other families in the shrapnel, just to prove a point? I see Michaela's face from the art day, so full of arrogant glee, and then I picture her later that night, her parents confronting her with what I had shown them. I made a child's world fall apart, and a part of me feels sick about it. And then there's Pamela. After everyone else had left, she was still standing there, almost like she was rooted to the spot. She didn't look at me. She just stared at the blank wall where I'd propped the tablet, as if she could still see the videos playing. The fury was gone. The defensiveness was gone. All that was left was this raw, gaping look of horror. She looked completely broken. And if I'm being brutally, gut-wrenchingly honest with myself, was that what I wanted all along? For years, she has dismissed me, belittled my concerns, and painted me as the overly sensitive, dramatic Tia. My opinions about Tommy never mattered. I was just background noise. A part of me, a dark, petty part that I'm ashamed to admit exists, had been fantasizing about a moment like this for years. A moment where I could finally, indisputably prove her wrong. A moment where she would be forced to see that I was right and she was wrong. And I got it. I got to watch the smug certainty drain from her face and be replaced by the devastating truth. But seeing it happen didn't feel like a win. It felt cruel. It felt like I had taken my own anger at her and used her son's pain as a crowbar to pry her open. Did my need to protect Tommy get tangled up with my need to punish his mother? Am I the asshole for using such a destructive method to get to the truth? But then, just as I start to drown in the guilt, my mind goes back to the bathroom. I see Tommy's little body, trembling under the buzz of the clippers. I feel the weight of that glittery, hateful note in my hand. And I remember the look in his eyes when he pleaded with me to make it stop. In that moment, he was utterly alone. The one person on Earth who was supposed to be his fiercest protector, his safe harbor, was the one holding the weapon. The bullying from Michaela was awful, yes, but the real, soul-crushing damage wasn't done in the alley with a wad of gum. It was done in his own bathroom by his own mother, who looked at his wound and told him he deserved it. That's a kind of betrayal a kid might never recover from. Maybe my methods were messy. Maybe they were too public, too harsh. Maybe I am the asshole for how I did it. But the system had failed him. His mother had failed him. The neighborhood's kids will be kids attitude had failed him. He had no voice. All I did was find a way to make everyone listen to what he had been trying to say all along. I didn't just want justice for the gum in his hair. I wanted justice for every time he'd been told to man up, for every time his feelings were dismissed, for every time he was made to feel like his pain was his own fault. I had to give him his voice back, no matter what it cost. I just don't know if the cost to everyone else was too high. So it's been a couple of weeks, and the dust is starting to settle. Or maybe it's just revealing the crater I left behind. The neighborhood is tense. There are a lot of tight, polite smiles at the local bakery and conversations that stop abruptly when I walk past. Michaela's parents did the right thing, I'll give them that. The girls were grounded for a month, lost all their electronics, and had to write Tommy formal apology letters. Michaela's mom even came to my door and gave me a stiff, tearful apology, which was one of the most awkward experiences of my entire life. The public shaming worked. The bullying stopped. But the real change, the one that matters most, is Pamela. The night of the confrontation, after she finally came back inside, she just sat on her sofa and stared into space for an hour. The next morning, she asked me to sit with her. There were no defenses left, no excuses. She just looked at me, her eyes red and swollen, and said, "I saw his face in the mirror, Sophia, but I saw my own face too. I looked just like my mother." She cried then, these horrible, ragged sobs that sounded like they were being torn out of her. Later that day, she sat Tommy down. I was there in the corner, feeling like an intruder. She took his little hands in hers and her voice was trembling. "Tommy," she said, "Mommy was wrong. I was so wrong. I didn't listen to you, and I hurt you. What those girls did was cruel, but what I did was worse. I am so sorry. I broke your trust, and I promise I am going to spend the rest of my life earning it back." He didn't say anything. He just let her hug him. But it was the first time I'd seen her truly see him in years. It wasn't just words. She started seeing a counselor, and she signed up for a parenting workshop. She's actually trying. And Tommy, he's healing. He's still quiet, but the hollowed-out look is gone from his eyes. His buzzed hair is starting to grow in, all soft and fuzzy. Last week, I took him shopping and he spent 20 minutes meticulously picking out a new baseball cap. He wears it everywhere. It feels like his armor, his choice, his way of taking back control of his own head. And my brother, who finally found his spine, signed him up for martial arts classes. He came home from his first class and showed me how to do a block, his small face serious with concentration. For the first time in months, I saw a flicker of that fierce, joyful little boy I was so afraid we had lost for good. So, the outcome was good. It was what I wanted. Tommy is safe, and his mom is finally becoming the parent he deserves. But I can't shake the feeling that I built this better future on a foundation of wreckage. I manipulated an entire community. I publicly humiliated a group of children, broadcasting their worst moment for all their parents to see. I cornered my own sister-in-law and systematically tore down every one of her defenses in the most public way possible, leaving her with no choice but to break. My methods were calculated, ruthless, and honestly, a little cruel. I didn't just want to protect Tommy, I wanted to burn Pamela's old way of parenting to the ground, and I didn't care who got caught in the fire. So, Reddit, I need to know. I know the outcome was good for my nephew, but I blew up a part of our family and our neighborhood to get there. AETA for orchestrating this public takedown to defend my nephew when his own mother wouldn't?